Thanks a lot for coming in.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
Something about this community appeals to you?
This is a wonderful place to live.
For Kelowna Now, this is Kent Mulgat. And we're joined by researcher Greg Garrard from UBCO. You have been looking at climate skepticism. So I'm just going to start with an open question. What have you been doing on this topic?
So most of the research that has been done on climate skepticism has been kind of looking at whole populations, and we decided to go much closer up and to look at actual texts and to ask, what do climate skeptics think? What do they say? How do they say it? And that's why we took a literary approach to climate skepticism.
And I should say, you are from the English department?
Yeah.
This doesn't seem like the climate science department.
No. And I'm a sustainability professor, and it's kind of unexpected that somebody working in the environmental field would also be working in literature, but that's what I do.
So you've taken a look at what people have written on this topic. Yeah. And what have you come to understand about those people who are sort of outside the whole belief structure about climate change?
So I was working with colleagues from other countries, and we looked at German, French, American, and British climate skepticism. So I did the British climate skeptics, and one of the things I found was that they're really funny. So it's mostly, a lot of British climate skepticism is humorous or sort of sardonic. The other thing that was a really big surprise is that many climate skeptics are scientific idealists. So we think of climate skeptics as being anti-science, and maybe some are, and I think probably some are, but actually in many cases they have an idealized idea about science, and then they're kind of disappointed by the way climate science has to work, and so they feel like they've been let down.
It always sort of seems to me that the feel of those people who put forward their skeptical views about it is that they've simply decided to believe that, and they may or may not seek out any sort of scientific underpinnings for that. They just don't want to believe that it's true, and that's where they are on it. Am I wrong?
I think so. I think I think you are wrong.
Tell me why I'm wrong.
So, because firstly, I don't think any of us really chooses our beliefs. Like, we can choose some sorts of beliefs, and we can explore and question some of our beliefs, but our underlying kind of identity about belief isn't chosen. Mine isn't, yours isn't. Right. Another thing to say is that no one wants this to be true. So a lot of climate skeptics will say,
wishful thinking then.
We don't want it to be true. No one wants climate
what
change
I'm trying to
be
say
true.
is wishful thinking to believe that it's not happening.
Yeah, that's right. But actually all of us want to disbelieve it on some level because, as Al Gore says, I mean, actually inconvenient doesn't even cover it. Okay. It's way more than inconvenient.
So to get back to where I was wrong, when I say people are choosing their beliefs, you would say what? Their beliefs come to them, and they may come from the people they're around.
That's right. Our cultural identities have a bigger influence on forming our beliefs than facts. We generally, not always, but we generally fit facts to our cultural identities and not the other way around. And that's true for people that believe in climate change just as much as people that don't.
Okay, so what should I do? Based on what you've learned, if I sit down to dinner somewhere and somebody is loudly saying how climate change isn't real, or people aren't causing it, or it's not a big problem, and I'm sitting there biting my lip, do you have any suggestions on good ways to handle that? Yeah,
totally, because the problem that we're facing now is actually political polarization. The divide is the biggest problem. And that divide is often manifested at dinner tables or in bars or whatever. Right. And the place to start is trying to find common ground and trying to avoid kind of ridicule and stigmatization and self-righteousness, especially, because none of us is entitled to self-righteousness on this. And to say, okay, so fine. So what do you think is going on? And are there things that we could do that would be good, beneficial, irrespective of whether or not it's true? So the biggest producer of wind energy in America is not California, but Texas. And in Texas, they have huge wind capacity because it's really cheap. And they're not talking about climate change, they're just talking about what is cheap and sensible. And in Florida, where there's the divide between the Republicans and the Democrats, and it's about 50-50, they're not talking about climate change. They're talking about what happens when sea levels rise, which is happening. And so you don't need to talk about whether or not it's caused by humans. You can just say, what do we do about this? How do we solve the problem?
So people will say things like, the climate's changed before, right? We've had ice ages, it goes up and down, right? So,
that's all true.
You know, it's all happening outside of our control. What do you say?
Yeah. Well, climate skeptics pick up on, certain things that are factual, right? Yes, the climate has changed before. Yes, it's been much hotter than it's going to be even in the next probably 100 or 200 years. The problem is the rate of change. So change happens, climates change, yes, but it's the rate of change that is really unprecedented. And human beings, my own view is actually that human beings will do very well at adapting to that. We will even find all kinds of opportunities in change. There's no disaster so great that someone hasn't profited from it in human history. So, it's the other creatures that I worry about.
So in order to do this research, you really had to take yourself out of your own beliefs and try to just be more kind of omniscient and just look at the different. Yeah. So, and in doing that, it sounds like you did say, well, even in my own old echo chamber, we have our problems too. We're driving to our climate conferences in our cars and planes.
Or flying, that's right. Yeah, because actually, we're all inside the fossil fuel world, and we shouldn't. I kind of feel for the Albertans because, here in BC, there's been, I think, a lot of self-righteousness about Trans Mountain and so on. And I think from an Albertan perspective, if I were them, I would be thinking, come on, you're part of this. So, we need to get away from the idea that anyone is entitled to be self-righteous about it. And we need to be focusing on how to problem solve. And the best way to do that is to get people with different viewpoints together and problem solve in a way that avoids kind of pressing the cultural identity buttons. And you press the cultural identity buttons when you're self-righteous or when you accuse people of being denialists or whatever.
Right. So have you had good, productive conversations with people that are firmly deniers of climate change?
Yeah. When I had a conference here in Kelowna on climate skepticism, and a bunch of people contacted me because they didn't believe that I was serious about listening to what they had to say. They just assumed that what I was really going to do was find good reasons to reject their point of view. And so I had email conversations with them where I was like, actually, no, I really do want to know. And they were really surprised by that because they were expecting that because a lot of the time on this issue, I think universities act as a kind of ivory tower, and we put up a wall around ourselves and say, we're the experts, and nobody else gets to comment or be involved. And I just think that's not constructive.
So I find my feelings on this topic seem to oscillate between, exasperation that we're still really not doing much about it, to, just fatalism, and it's just, and then I get apathetic.
Yes.
Is that normal?
It's very normal. It's very normal. And, especially with my students, when I talk to them about it, they often go straight to kind of apathy, from panic to apathy, without stopping in between at the sort of at the problem solving stage, at the what can we find that we agree about, that we can all do together, that would actually be good irrespective of whether or not it's true.
Yeah, it almost seems to me that we need our smartest scientists to start worrying about what is going to happen in 100 years, because it does seem like that ball is rolling down the hill now.
Oh, yeah.
So let's get the B team working on slowing it down as best we can.
Yeah.
Well, we've got the A team trying to solve how we're going to survive a much warmer planet.
Yeah, well, scientists are talking now about what they call deep adaptation, and I think that's right. That although skeptics are right that there's a lot of uncertainty about the specifics of what climate change will involve, especially at a regional scale. That's actually very, very hard to predict. The direction of travel is absolutely clear, and we're already committed to it. It's going to happen. So although we should continue to try to slow it down or stop it or reduce emissions, we also do just have to start thinking, and I think people are starting to think much more seriously about deep adaptation.
Right. In the meantime, we've got an election that's just occurred in Alberta that just seems to further bring home this kind of cultural divide on this issue that only seems to be worsening.
Yeah.
And here you've studied exactly that sort of bridge between the two.
Yeah.
So can you leave us here with any advice on how we can make sure that we don't get into a deeper and deeper divide?
Keep talking to people that you don't agree with. Listen to people you don't agree with. Look for them. Seek out views that you don't agree with, not the sound bites that you get on Facebook, but actually engage with viewpoints you don't agree with, because you'll probably find that they have things to say that will surprise you and that you'll agree with.
Fantastic. It was great talking to you.
Yeah,
Greg Garrard,
likewise.
researcher at UBCO, and thank you for watching Kelowna Now.